Hello everyone, this is FM Viktor Neustroev. Thank you for joining my webinar. Today we are going to talk about secrets of Blitz. Okay, just let's wait for more attendees to come before we start. Oh, guys, please let me know if the sound and video quality is good. And actually, maybe while we are waiting for more attendees, you can share your own secrets. How do you play Blitz? So what tricks, traps, what do you use? And how, by the way, you spend your time, if we are speaking about, for example, 3+2 games. Okay, fine. The sound. My secret is okay. Play fast, play very fast. Do a basic tactical analysis. Of course, basic tactical analysis works. So I usually play 30 minutes games on chess.com. I just play for endings. Okay. One of my students, by the way, exchanges pieces to simplify the position, to be able not to blunder anything. Okay, so today I prepared 5 different tips for you, and we are going to talk about them. Of course, there are a lot of tips to follow, to take into account before you play a Blitz game. What would I suggest? So first of all, you should play a Blitz game when you think that you are in the best condition. So don't play at night. However, I understand that most of you have to play at nights. If you think you are tired, just don't play. Moreover, don't play the game after you lost several games in a row. What means that you are probably not in your best condition. So that's why you better play the next day, for example. And before playing Blitz, I kindly recommend you doing a few puzzles. Not a lot, just 2-3, not more. 2-3 puzzles to warm up and then play Blitz. Okay, so what is the first tip that I prepared for you? It's obvious. Play logical moves quickly. What does it mean? It means that when you have a choice to play this or that move and you believe they're approximately equal and doesn't really change the position enough, you shouldn't think. You should just play and then think about your future plan. That's the best strategy. And the second one is to know the opening you play. So you should know your opening. Actually, let's start with the example where I illustrate what happens if I know the opening but my opponent doesn't. This is actually one of the games, one of that 6 games that I scored 5.5. No, I mentioned it in my webinar announcement. Okay, so I'm streaming this webinar as well as on Twitch as well as on YouTube. Okay, so this is my game. I was playing with white pieces. No, actually, I would like to start with this one. This one is devoted to openings. I was white. I played e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, and this is where I start with fried liver attack, knight g5 move. And you know that d5 is a common move. Oh, bishop c5, Traxler counterattack. Oh, I am quite familiar with these lines and probably know more than my opponent, but he decided to trick me with knight e4 move. Because it was a Blitz game, the most logical reaction could be just to take there. But after d5, the position is equal. So probably bishop d3, d takes a4, bishop takes a4, and then let's say bishop c5. And black pieces are developed while the number of pawns is equal. I can take on c6, but I'm not sure if it offers a better position for me. Probably not. I can definitely take in case if they play f5, but here no advantage for white. The position is equal. That was his trap, and this is what actually I believe maybe most people play against him. But of course I'm familiar with this opening. That's why actually I played. And I knew that here I shouldn't take on f7 with the knight because of queen f6. But I may take with the bishop. And after king e7, I have two moves. Actually, this position I was demonstrating to my younger students, including my daughter. And I told her to play d3 because d3 provokes them to capture on g5, and after bishop g5 the queen is lost. Of course, there is no guarantee that they play such a move, but they may play knight f6 and you just retreat with the bishop and that's it. You gain the pawn on f7 and black lost their castling privilege. So white is much better. However, I knew that d3 is a possible move, but mainly for amateurs and some intermediate club players. So, however, I also knew that d4 is a good move in this position, and this is where after this move I didn't remember anything. Of course, I understand that knight g5, bishop g5, the game is over. But what if they take on d4? So I played this move and started calculating the lines. I knew that this move definitely works, but how react exactly on e takes d4, knight takes d4, or on something else, I didn't know at all. So that's why I made the moves. I made this move and started calculating the lines. For example, if e takes d4, I was thinking about queen e2 and then just a pressure on e4. If they play this move, I can play maybe this. However, after d5, I can just take on e4 maybe. Or maybe just retreat with my bishop. Retreat with my bishop looks good, by the way. Or f3. f3 is good as well. f3, h6, I take there, and they can't capture my knight because of bishop g5. Yeah, I think I would play like that. So if e takes d4, it's queen e2. If knight takes d4, then I actually didn't know what exactly to do. Now, analyzing the game after, I realized that knight c3 was the best move, but my original move was that. And if now knight retreats, then I can retreat with my bishop to d5, threatening with knight f7. So they have to do this. In this position I can just castle and open up with f4. I believe the king will be checkmated in several moves. That was my plan. So what did my opponent play? He just moved the knight back. That was another mistake. And I took to open up the position. Knight takes e5, and I decided to retreat. Maybe it wasn't obligatory. Maybe a better move was just queen e2 immediately. Because after d6 I play a4. So let's look at this variation. Now then I take on e5 immediately. So d6, f4, h6. I take there, they take there, then what? Take there, but king f7. So I'm not sure if this is good enough. That's why I decided first to retreat with my bishop to b3. He did play h6. What do you think? How did I continue? How would you play in this position? Would you retreat with the knight, castle, or maybe do something else? And so while you are thinking, I can also say that it's not enough just to train Blitz. To be able to become a good Blitz player, you should improve your overall chess level. Yeah, so f4 or queen e2. Yeah, actually queen e2. Queen e2 is the best. Well, knight to f3 doesn't make sense. It just exchanges the knights. So queen e2. If they take, I take there and then capture on g5. Wait a sec. Sorry. If they take there, queen e5 is a checkmate. Sorry. They played d6. How did I play? I could play f4, but I played knight f7 fork, because the knight was already pinned. Queen has to move. I can take on e5, after which my position is completely winning, but I could also take the rook, but then my knight is trapped, I think. I just played f4, and of course I expected him to play this move, after which I immediately played queen e3, and then it's easy to realize that the knight is lost. So king moves, f takes e5, and this is where he resigned. Well, the game was really quick. I didn't spend a lot of time. In this position, I know that d4 is good. I played it immediately. He had to think, played knight f6. d takes e5 is a logical move. Retreating is another logical move. And after h6, I just created a mating threat. Then the idea of f4 worked. Okay. One more example of how to play, how to take the advantage of in the Blitz game if you know the opening properly is this one. You know I'm an expert in Can-Sicilian, but it wasn't Can-Sicilian. My opponent played d4 immediately on the second move against Sicilian. So I took, expecting him to play c3, after which I can play knight f6 and transpose to a Lapin variation, which this variation I demonstrate in my the Victorious Can-Sicilian course on Chessable. But my opponent took with the queen, and you know, this is actually a bad move, because now the queen becomes the object of the attack. Queen d3. Then I have no ideas of what strategy to play. I believe knight f6 is good, and once I played it. I also think that g6 is really good, but I'm not familiar with it. But I definitely knew that on d3 the queen becomes the object of the attack if only I set up my pieces like I usually do in Can-Sicilian. That's why I play e6. Knight c3, a6. No, knight e5 in this position, maybe, but where? Here, knight e5, but queen g3. How to deal with this knight? It's also the object of the attack. So that's why no. I decided to switch to Can-Sicilian. So one more tip for you. If, for example, you have to play the opening that you are not familiar, but you see you can transpose to the position you already know, then try to make a transposition of the moves and play the opening you're familiar with. Maybe it wouldn't be the exact position that you remember, but it could be a similar position with typical plans that you already know, but your opponent doesn't. And it will be easier for you to play such a game. So, knight f3, my opponent played a few moves with the queen, what means that he lost a few tempers. And now I decided to play b5, because usually b5 and bishop b7 is played later in the game when other pieces are developed. But in case if white lost tempers, then black can allow themselves to play b5, bishop b7 immediately. Bishop e2, bishop b7, castle, and I reacted with knight b4, which is not a good move, of course. Yeah, we both lost tempers, but I lost tempers on my bishop development. That is helpful in future. But he just moved the queen. Now I played knight b4. It's not a good move, actually. I just wanted him to stay on d1 with his queen. I also played knight f6 and queen c7 in this position in the previous games against him, but knight b4, not the best option, however, why not? Queen goes to d1, what means that he can't activate his rook. Queen c7, provoking him to play a3, knight goes to c6, and so I lost two tempers with this move, but he also played two. Why I decided to spend these two tempers to force him to play queen d1? Because I expected him to play rook d1, which I consider it to be stronger than his other plans. So I just wanted to avoid him from playing rook d1. Bishop e3, knight f6. No, knight f6 also threatens with this. That's why h3. But bishop e7, I just develop my pieces naturally. Rook a1, castle, bishop d3. How to play? I think he gonna do this, and if I take, maybe he'll try to apply some discovered attack with the bishop. Right now I don't see any clear move, but it's good to play some prophylaxis with d6. This is where he played bishop f4. Try to guess my next move. So if you guys are familiar with Count Sicilian, you'll do the next move just immediately without any time spending on thinking. So what can you say? How black should play in this position? And if you are a Count Sicilian or Scheveningen player, then you'll definitely answer. Okay, e5. What other suggestions do you have? e5, e5. Okay, I'll also I'll also check some comments here. Anirudh suggests to retreat with the knight and then castle. Wait, no, it was a previous comment. Sorry. So rook d8 is another option. Okay, I would say rook d8 is not bad. As for e5, in this exact position, even e5 is good. But if you are a true Count Sicilian player, you'll play knight e5. Why? Because we, as Sicilian players, understand that if they take, possessing the d file will be in our favor, and doubling the pawns on the e file is not a big problem. Moreover, the pawns are quite strong there. So that's why after knight e5 he for some reason decided to retreat. And then again rook fd8. Now if he takes, I can pressure on the d file. Knight d4, not a good move. Oh, I decided to play queen b6 just to chase this knight. I'm not sure if it's a good move. Maybe I'd better apply a typical plan immediately, but I decided to include these. Bishop f1 to protect. Rook ac8, activating my rook, and he played f4, which I of course expected. What do you think I should do right now? Knight c6, but okay, if only I play knight c6, I expect them to play bishop to f2. What knight f e7? What do you mean? The knight is hanging. Knight f e8, but the knight is hanging on e5. Ah, so you wanted to take the advantage of the pin. I understand, but knight e8, they take there, I take there, bishop takes, and then what do you suggest? Bishop f6 or f6 with the pawn? I believe it's too risky, but we can check. We can check. Knight e8, they, for example, take, we take, bishop takes. We are a piece down, so f6. No, f6 they just retreat, and in case of queen d4 exchange, so there is no advantage, the position is approximately equal. If you take with the rook, then probably bishop f2, and after rook d1 they take on b6. And looks like you have to exchange rooks after that. And again, nowhere advantage for black. Okay, so knight e8. Moreover, knight e8 allows him to play something else. So nobody suggested knight c4 move. But guys, why? For me, this move is a logical move. Because the c4 is one of the best spots for the knight in such a system, and that's why we play knight e5 or knight a5. Okay, let's get back and just quickly go through this line once again. f6, bishop g3, and e5. This is what you said. No, maybe knight e2. What can you say? Knight d5. Knight d5. Bishop takes d5. E takes d5. And if rook takes d5, bishop f2, and actually the e pawn is pinned, so e5 didn't make sense, unfortunately. So knight c4, of course. And this is where they have to take. They have to take on c4, otherwise I take on b2. No, maybe this move was also possible, but then I was thinking about knight b2. Let's say bishop f2, knight takes b2, queen attacks my knight, and then I play queen e5, because if they take there, I saved my queen, and then I capture on c3, so I'll be a pawn up. Bishop c4, that move was played. Rook takes c4, they played this move, and I reacted with queen c7. So can you please tell me what's the idea of queen c7 move? So positional exchange sacrifice. You mean rook takes c3? Yes, exactly. Exactly, you are absolutely right. One of the ideas is to sacrifice on c3. No, it's not the only idea, there is one more. But yeah, after that I can take on e4, and then c3 pawn is hanging as well, so I get a full compensation if I take these two pawns. And then I can activate my other bishop. Well, I think he'd better play these. In such a case, I would probably play either these or this move. I think g6 with the idea to fiancetta my dark squared bishop. This is quite common. I was also thinking about d5 to open up the d file, and in case if he plays e5, just knight e4. Maybe d5 is even better here. Okay. So I played this, he played that, and actually at this moment he was in a he just didn't understand what to do. He was absolutely frustrated. He couldn't come up with a plan. In such positions, white tries to initiate the kingside attack, and my opponent understood it. But the next move he played was f5, which was a blunder. Instead, he'd better at least try playing g4, but if he does g4, I can take on c3, and maybe the king will be too exposed for this position. So another tip for you that you may learn, if for example you have more time than your opponent, no, it's not the case of that game. Here I have 26 seconds less, but if I would have maybe a minute or 45 seconds more than my opponent, then you should be looking how to sharpen the position, so how to make it sharper. And the best way to do it is to sacrifice the pawn or sacrifice the exchange, especially if it's a blitz game. For example, if my opponent plays these, which definitely makes sense because he's gonna play g5 on the next move, then queen h5 maybe, I would do this. He takes, I play there, and looks like he has to give up the other pawn, or maybe I'll take on f2. So please keep it in mind. When your opponent has less time than you, try to make the position sharper, because that stimulates him to calculate the lines and spend his time. So for example, even if he finds a correct solution, calculates everything, he'll spend a lot of time, and later in the game, because of the time pressure, he'll make a mistake. Think about it. Actually, with equal timing, like approximately what happened in my game, you can also sacrifice if you believe your opponent would have to think and spend more time and get into time trouble, or will likely make a mistake because of the time pressure. So he played f5, not because of the time pressure, but because he was just frustrated with which plan to apply. He knew that he could attack on the king side, but how to attack exactly, nobody knows. So f5, how would you react on this move? And here I believe the answer is obvious. I'm sure everyone knows. It takes f5, are you kidding me? Of course the answer is e5. To chase the knight has to move. Okay, yeah, it takes f5, then rook c3. Okay, I see what you mean, but actually it's not required in this position. My opponent just blundered it. Knight f3, and I can successfully just capture the pawn on e4. Knight takes e4, rook takes e4. So I got a pawn, and this is what my opponent didn't expect. That's why he is under the pressure. I can call it a psychological pressure, and this is where you can also learn. So if you believe your opponent starts making passive and defensive moves, he is already under the psychological pressure, what means that you should increase your initiative and try to force him to defend. In such a case, he'll blunder more. What exactly happened in my game? Rook takes rook, bishop takes rook, the bishop double attacks. Actually, there was no need to exchange the rooks. He could play something else, let's say g4 or c3, but he did take. That was a double attack. c3, I take on f5, he plays this move, and then I should play simply. So you see, you have the advantage, you have extra material. The best strategy, even if it's not a blitz game, just a standard game, the best strategy is to simplify, make solid move, exchange pieces, and finally get a simple but winning position. Now, d5, bishop c5, trading the bishops of course makes sense. So thank you for your suggestion. That was my plan, but I decided to move my bishop out. So I just played bishop e6. My opponent played this, and after bishop c4 resigned. So you see, because he was under the pressure, he started making huge mistakes. Now, the idea of rook e1 is to play knight d4, because I wanted to play f6 and d5, so probably he understood that if I play f6 he could just play this move, which is actually, it's not doing much in this position. I can at least take, or I can retreat on c8 or on f7, doesn't really matter, it's still okay. No, that was his intention, but bishop c4 and the game is over. No, rook e2 of course, but in such a case he'll be down a lot. The game ended. So what you may learn from this game? So try to reach the opening you are familiar with, especially if you are familiar with the plans and typical ideas there. Don't forget to make logical moves quickly. For example, because I am a Sicilian player, I knew that knight e5 here is the best option. I also knew that the knight finally goes to c4, what exactly happened in my game. And then another typical idea was the exchange sacrifice on c3. However, it wasn't required. My opponent blundered it because he was confused with the next step. Okay, so that were the openings which are quite important for blitz games. If you are more familiar, you are likely to spend less time than your opponent. Okay, now let's switch to this game, which I played with white pieces against the same player. e4, knight f6, e5, knight d5, d4, d6. So that was Alekin defense. I know it, but I didn't expect c6 move in this position. No, typically I was expecting g6, but they did play g6, but later. And in this position, of course, I should take on d7. I just forgot and played this move. g6, and again I have a chance to take. Or to retreat to f3. I played knight d2, which is not a good move. Bishop g7. No, he'd better take on e5. But he played bishop g7, knight df3, protecting it. So that was the logical move that I played immediately. Castle. And now, if we are speaking about logical moves, can you please suggest the move that doesn't require any calculation but is definitely helpful for your position? I want you to suggest two such moves. What are they? No, c4 requires calculation because after knight b4 the bishop is the object of the attack. So bishop b1, let's say. Then they may capture on e5 several times, exchange the queens. This is what I have to calculate and evaluate, but I think white is slightly better there. The move that doesn't require any calculation is this and that, of course. Bishop d2 and the rook to e1. But rook e1 is also a helpful move in this current position because I support the e5. No, bishop g5 doesn't make sense here because after bishop g5 f6 can be played. So he did take. I took with my knight and queen c7. c4 with the temper, knight goes there, and in this position I could play bishop f1, but I didn't want him to play this move. That's why I played bishop b1. What to play? So a6 b4 and bishop b2, that was my plan. Or another plan was to play just bishop f4 and threaten with knight g6. So my opponent played c5 to open up the center. Bishop f4, queen b6, and then I played a practical move, but that move wasn't obligatory in this position. So that was the moment where I had to think. But you see, my opponent has just a minute, and I have minute and 40 seconds. So what do you think I should do? Play a3 and then b4? Okay, guys, I have a question for you. So look at this position. I have 1 minute 42 seconds. My opponent has 1 minute and 9 seconds. What do you think? What type of the position I should choose? And if so, what is my next move? What should be my next move? Because I played not a good move. Well, play sharp makes sense, yes, but in this position I'm not sure if I can sharpen it. Bishop d takes c4, bishop e4. Could you guys please d takes c5, probably you mean, and bishop e4. So could you please explain these ideas? I was not sure about a3 actually. I did play a3, but later. Okay, so what do I want in this position? I want my opponent to spend time on thinking. And if so, I should keep the position complicated. For example, if I do exchange on c5, the position simplifies a bit. I can play a3, b4, but they play knight c6 and exchange knights. So to be able to keep the position closed and force him to think, I should play this move. So I think it's Parallax who suggested d5 first. Yeah, this move is really good. Then what? They should probably play e6 and undermine, but actually I have enough time to play a3 first, and knight goes to the edge. Then let's just protect, maybe with queen d2, and if they take, I take with my pawn. The position is closed, and it's more difficult for my opponent to find a right plan, and that's why he would spend time on thinking. I did capture on c5, just with the intention of sharpening the position, but actually didn't work. Now, I'm not sure if d5 could be a passed pawn in such a case. If I push it further, it can be the object of the attack. So I played b4, expecting him to play queen b6, and then I wanted to push c5 and then rook a2, but he did queen d4 and I had to exchange the queens. Bishop e6, and now I am in a time trouble. So how to play when you are in a time trouble? What do you think? You see, I have 20 seconds. My opponent has 1 minute and 5 seconds. And actually the position is slightly in his favor. But for a Blitz game, I would say it's approximately equal. But his time advantage, this is what I should take into account first. No, I see. So I'm watching what you suggest, guys, on YouTube. So Anirudh suggests to win as quickly as possible. Of course, at every moment of the game, I would like to win as quick as possible. No, in such a case, I should play simple and moves that don't require any calculation and doesn't change the position enough. So the pawn might be hanging. I played rook d2 to activate my rook, pressure the knight. So I expect him to retreat. If he retreats, I take and then maybe play bishop a2 maybe. Or I can let him take on c4 because I capture on e7. I think I would, if knight c6, I would take and play c5, which is probably not good. But with the time pressure, you have to play short and simple moves, which don't blunder anything. That's the goal. No, you shouldn't move randomly, but play simple moves that don't blunder anything. This is another tip for you. So rook d2, bishop takes on e5. This is what was played. Then knight c6. And I have a bishop pair. This is what I already realized, what means that my position is better even if I lose the pawn on c4. That's why I decided to sacrifice the pawn on c4, which was taken by him. Rook d7 to attack on b7. He'd better play rook b8 maybe, but he did this move. I think b5 was better actually, but okay, never mind. And now I saw the pin, so I made this move immediately, rook a c8, and then I decided to pass the game into the endgame. But that endgame will be with bishops of opposite color. However, we are playing on seconds, you see? And this is how I could get the initiative. Maybe that was not the best move. I could better take this, but okay, I played that move. For example, if my opponent plays this, I have at least rook c7. Or if I want, yeah, looks like in this position I have to play rook c7. Rook c7 or rook d2. I would play rook c7, I think. Because if only I take there, they can play rook c2 and threaten a checkmate if only I move the bishop. But he played a5 because he considered the pawn to be a weakness, a5. So please suggest a move. We are playing on seconds. I have 5. What do you think? Which simple and helpful move I can play immediately? Who can suggest? B takes a5. Yeah, b takes a5 is a simple move, but I actually wanted the pawn to stay on the b file because I didn't want my bishop to become the object of the attack. For example, b takes a5, b takes a5, I play something and they play rook b8, I have to move the bishop. Aha, h3, but not h3 but h4. Why h4? No, of course, you know that in the end game, especially a rook end game, it makes sense to locate the pawns like that. However, that is not the case because my opponent has a light squared bishop. That's why playing g3 means to weaken my king's position. But h4, why not? Moreover, this move has another plan inside it. I want to play h5 and maybe take there. Why it's important? If he takes with the f pawn, then I get the total control over the 7th rank. If he takes with the h pawn, then I can probably retreat and attack the king through the h file. So h4, it's an escape square for the king, as well as an attacking move. So nobody suggested h4. Okay, a takes b4, a takes b4, bishop e6, my rook is hanging, I have just a few seconds left and I played rook b7 move. Rook c2, bishop f6, just anywhere to a safe place. Rook goes to c6 to protect. Maybe in this position I could play better, but I played this move and didn't notice that he has bishop c8. However, bishop c8 is not a big problem. I should sacrifice and I can still dominate in this position, especially when we both are in a time trouble. And my opponent played h6, eventually maybe he wanted something else, but that was a complete blunder. H takes g6. If he does that move, the game is over after rook g7, it's a checkmate. Rook h7 then and rook h8, all moves with checks. So he played bishop d5, I took on f7, king moves there. I think he'd better, he could take. But if he takes, I do this check, and if actually he can go to h7. Yeah, he'd better take actually. He takes, I can go to h7, or I can just take, they take, and they play rook b8, king h7. And then maybe bishop d8 to grab the pawn for free. The position will be completely winning. But he played king h7. Why? Because he was also playing on time and decided to keep the position complicated with more pieces on the board. So bishop d4 attacking there, and this is where I blundered. Rook c1, king h2, bishop b7. So you know, when you are under time pressure, you are likely to blunder. However, your opponent also may blunder. But this position is still in my favor, especially after he plays rook c6. I took there. Not the best move, but anyway. King goes to g6 and then b5. Rook goes there, and now I have to exchange rooks. He took with the king. He'd better take with the rook, but he took with the king, and now I played b6 to bring my pawn closer to the queen square. And if this move, wait, in this move, in this position, I could just win after b7. Oh my god, this is what I missed. This is what I missed. I played bishop e3. So you see, under the time pressure, I decided to play a simple move. King e8, king g3. So b7 wins. King d7, but we both didn't see it. King f4. So these moves were played automatically. So you see, I even increase my timing here. Now the game is over because I take on h6 and create a passed pawn there. So these moves were played automatically. I promote a pawn to a queen and even collected some time there. So please, if you see a simple and logical move, do it. Especially when you are no, in two cases especially, when you are in a time trouble and when you have extra material. Okay, let's continue. Let's now talk about the end games. And this is the game that I didn't win, but draw recently. Yeah, I drew this game recently. However, it was completely winning, and the reason why I didn't win it was because I made a mistake in the end game. So, what do I suggest? If you are looking of how to improve in Blitz, you should study endgames, especially Rook endgames, because most of the endgames are Rook endgames. You trade everything, then keep Rooks on the board, maybe some minor pieces, but these minor pieces are likely to be exchanged. This is what I want you to study. However, if you decide what to start with, to work on tactics or to work on endgames, I would definitely say work on tactics and do a lot of puzzles. Okay, let's continue. So we can quickly go through this game and then talk about the end game. It was English opening. I was quite familiar with it. Played moves almost automatically, and finally we reached a very typical for English opening position. My opponent played h4, which is not familiar. I didn't know how to react, but understood that he wants to play either knight g5 or bishop g5. Well, probably knight g5 to pressure my bishop on e6. I reacted with h6, and my opponent played queen c1. What can you say about queen c1? What's the goal of this move? Okay, I'll quickly answer the Anirudh's question about the pre-moves. How often do I use them? Sometimes, if I see that this is his only reaction and I can play this move in case if he does that, then I use pre-moves. But if speaking about the previous endgame where I was collecting time, I wasn't playing pre-moves only. I just knew what exactly move to play. I was waiting for his move. Maybe if he attacks my pawn, I should play in a different way. So of course the idea of queen c1 is to sacrifice the bishop on h6, which is not a good idea in general, but it's definitely a good idea for a blitz game. f5, provoking him to take on h6, because if now he does that, I have this move. He can of course check, but I go to f7 or f8, and then can probably play rook g6. Or just king e8, king goes there. Or just queen g8 and exchange the queens. Or queen h5, I go there. Oh, looks like in this position I have to play rook g6. Yeah, rook g6, exactly. There is not much he can do to exploit this pin. If this move, then this. Knight g5, I just take with the bishop. So that was the idea of rook f6. And when he takes on h6, I play rook f6 and successfully defend the king. If I played something else, let's say queen d7, bishop h6, g takes h6, queen takes h6, and knight g5, that would be too risky because it would allow my opponent at least to draw the game with a perpetual check by moving the queen from the h file to the g file and back. But f5 is a helpful move in such an opening and is also a defensive move against bishop h6. So f5, they played bishop h3. Weird. Queen d7. Queen d7 contains the idea of playing f4. This is what I immediately realized. He played this move and I played f4. Why I played such a move? Because it forces him to take immediately. And then if he decides to capture on a4, I have queen g4. And this is what I don't need to calculate. Queen g4 with the strong attack. I am not losing anything, and my opponent will be under the attack. Okay, let me quickly answer the question of Parallax, who suggested to play king h7 in this position with the intention of playing f5 later in future. Okay, king h7 is not a helpful move in this position. It could be, maybe, but there is no guarantee that the king is needed on h7. So that's why playing f5 immediately is better. If you see that you can do something without preparation, you'd better do it immediately, because if you spend several tempers on preparation, you are likely to miss something, or your opponent can find your threat, recognize your plan, and then just make one move and defend against it. Okay, so f5, bishop h3, queen d7, king g2, f4. Bishop takes e6, queen takes e6. They couldn't take. Knight e4. This is what they played. I played knight d5 just to reinforce my f4, bring more pieces to the attack. Knight c3, offering a trade. And this is where I had to calculate. So this is the exact case where I decided to sharpen the position when my opponent is low on time. What do you think? Which move did I play? That wasn't the best move, actually. The best move in this position, okay, maybe you can guess it. So which move did I play to sharpen the position, and what was the best move? Knight d4. Yes, you are absolutely right. This is the move I played. However, a more logical move like rook a d8 was also possible. But I played knight d4. Why? This is how I wanted to force him to think. For example, if he takes on d5, I can create a pin on f3 and even get more pressure if only I open up the f file. What else? If he takes on d4, I attack his knight, and he has to spend a temper and do something with the knight. Maybe take, then I take with the check. Maybe to go to e4, and if so, then I can maybe take on g3. So knight d4 slightly sharpened the position. He did take, I took, and then he played knight d5. Queen takes d5, check. He plays f3, but f3 of course weakens the g3. I took immediately. So if, for example, he takes on g3, what do you think could happen? What is the most simple move? Okay, so there is a good question. Let me answer it. I'll read the question first. I was playing a tournament today where there were 6 rounds with 15 plus 10, or 15 plus 5, I mean. I was playing the first match with a higher rated player. We both took time at the last moment. When he didn't have time, I blundered and he took the initiative. So after that, I didn't took much time on other games and lost 2 more games. So please tell me, how can I solve this problem? Just follow the tips. Don't spend time on logical moves. Play them quickly. Take time when it's required. For example, if it's the line that requires calculation, like my knight d4 move, which wasn't a good move, but that move that could sharpen the position and force my opponent to spend more time. And another advice that I can give to you: analyze your own Blitz games, or even any games that you played, especially tournament games. Okay, so the tip number 5 for you today: analyze your own Blitz games, and together with moves, look at the timing, because I know Chess and chess.com both allow you to shows what time left after you played the move. Okay, sharpening the position forces your opponent to think and calculate the lines, what means to spend time, and then he gets into time trouble, and with time pressure he is likely to make another mistake. So analyze your own games, and I have a quick story for you. So I was playing a lot in 2019, and once, or actually not once, but in a few tournaments during the summer, I met the top grandmaster from Belarus, Sergei Zhigalko. He is a good Blitz player. Probably he is one of the best players here on lichess.org. And he often participated in serious Grandmasters tournament, and he likes playing Blitz. At this tournament, he was together with his wife, and while he was playing the Blitz game, because there was also a Blitz tournament, while he was playing Blitz games, he asked his wife to record it. She was shooting it on her phone. Oh no, on the camera, of course. So, and after the game, he was just looking the video, trying to understand why at this simple position he spent time on a logical move, where he could improve, why his opponent played here faster, what mistakes did he play. And every game he improves. So this is not my own tip, but of course I do the analysis of my games. It's almost everyone does, and this is the way they can get better. Okay, so find the mistakes after you play the game. And it's not only blunders, inaccuracies, strategical mistakes that you can find, but also your mistakes on time consuming. For example, the position is simple, you spend a minute. What for? Who knows? Okay, another good question: when it's good to simplify the position? It's good to simplify the position when you are in a time trouble, because in such a case you don't have to spend time, you just have to play the moves, and maybe with the increment you can even collect some time, and then spend it on thinking. Also, when you have extra material, try to simplify, because it's easy to realize this material advantage in the end game. Let's say, for example, you have an extra piece in a sharp position. I would say both players can win. If you are under the attack, you may blunder something, or just wouldn't have enough time to find the defense. But if this is an endgame and you are up a piece, you are likely to win. You are unlikely to blunder anything if there are just a few pieces on the board. Okay, so thank you for your suggestions. If king g3, I think queen e5 and queen takes e2, because if now he goes to f2, I can take on h4. So queen e5 check, he probably blocks, I take there, plus improve my pieces. I think queen e5 was the best, at least the most logical. However, he did play queen c4 to pass the game into the endgame. Why did he decide to simplify? Another case when he thinks that he is under the attack. So he is under the attack, it takes time for him to find the moves. That's why he decides to exchange queens, not to get checkmated. Queen c4, d takes c4, bishop h4, then he does that. As for g5 move, that could make sense, but the bishop will be out of the game for a long time. So I played this. If he takes on h4, I take on e2 and gain the bishop back. But after rook a e1, I have to move the bishop back. King g3, check. King f2, and I decided to exchange the bishops. Maybe that wasn't the best idea, because his bishop is not good. I could probably continue with c5, with rook f6 as well, but bishop f4. Bishop takes bishop, rook takes f4. So I simplified because I have extra material. I am one pawn up. Rook g1, he is attacking there. I played rook e6. Rook h5. And in this position I can try to attack his weaknesses like that, which I didn't do. I think g5 was really good in this position. This is how I can block his rook. But I played b6, b4, and then c6, just not to allow the rook to get anywhere on the 5th rank. a3, king f7. I just did not know what to play. That's why I played the moves that are logical for me. So moving the king to the center looks quite logical. Rook d1, g5. He goes back with the rook. And I play c5 to support the pawn on d4. So finally I opened the position on the queen side and attacked the a3 pawn. c4 is a weakness as well, rook a4. And now he loses the game. But that's why he decided to sharpen the position. He played a4. That was his only chance. I took, exchanged, and this is where I should definitely take something. For example, take on a3 with a check, take on c4, but I played this move. So why? I have no ideas. I would better, of course, take there, but then he plays this move. However, if I play this, he can do this, but then he gives up the pawn on f3. And then takes one of these two. If he takes on a7, I play rook f5 and then promote the g pawn. If he takes the c5 one, I can probably play g4 and then g3. The pawn will be quite close to the queen square. I don't know why I didn't play it, but decided to play a5, considering it to be better. Rook b6 check, king f5, letting him to capture on h6, what he exactly did. I took there, and then played a4, so another mistake. Maybe it was better to play just this, and then take on f3. I played it later. Rook c6, king f4, rook takes c5, rook e3, and then I took. No, that was a mistake, and this position is actually a drawing position. So finally I had to move my rook back and then realized that the king is too closed too close to my pawn, and I have to draw the game. Finally, we agreed to a draw. But that was a completely winning in game. And my problem was just because I wasn't familiar of what exactly to play. So I didn't know this type of the end game and miscalculated Rook a3 line before. So if you are familiar with such end games, you will definitely outplay your opponent. I would definitely find a winning solution if I were playing with a lot of time. For example, if only I would have 2 minutes on my clock, I would find the winning plan. Okay, fine. Do you guys have any questions? I'm going to demonstrate one more in game. Yeah, Rook and games are difficult, and I have a course devoted to it. So let's take a minute for self-promotion. Just a sec. So, you know, I recently created a course devoted to calculation. If you are interested in it, you can find it here on my website. As for Rook and games, I also have a course, how to play Rook and games. This is the one, and actually it's quite cheap. So if you are looking for it, this is the link. What else? So this is my chess.com profile. If you are not in my friend list, I kindly recommend you send me a friend request. And here we also have an educational group, Tricks of Chess. For example, this is where you can find the recordings of my webinars. For currently, the webinar is recorded and the recording is published here. So this is the link to the our chess.com club. You may join. And finally, the link to my YouTube channel. I'm going to publish a few videos devoted. I actually didn't come up with the topic exactly, but that videos will be quite interesting about practical exercises of how to improve, how to stop blundering, and so on. Okay, let's get back. Let's get back to our webinar. And this is the game against the same opponent. I was playing with white pieces. It was okay. Actually, this game I already demonstrated to you. Looks like that's it. I just wanted to point out here that I played the endgame automatically. Starting from this moment, I played h4 and the game was played automatically. This is what I actually already explained. Okay, so let me just quickly answer your questions if you have any. Okay, is Blitz useful or harmful for chess players who want to improve? If you want to improve in Blitz, it makes sense to play Blitz. However, if you just want to improve the overall level or your ability to play chess, to calculate, then you'd better work on different exercises. You can actually email me tricks of chess at gmail.com. And one more thing, so guys, if you would like to study chess yourself, I have a self-study guide which you can download for free. So it's published on my website. Here, if you scroll down, you will find it. Guys, you can also suggest the topics for our next webinars. Okay, so another question. Can the effect of alcohol on can alcohol affect on chess skill? I see the. So can the effect of alcohol on chess skill be qualified in terms of vodka shot per elo point? Okay, no, it's a kind of a common tradition. I would say it was a common tradition for some Russian chess players to get drunk before the game. But according to my experience, so I didn't, of course, I didn't drink any alcohol before the game, but I had to play with drunk people. So I can say that they actually play much weaker when they are drunk. However, sometimes you can just underestimate them and miss something. And this is how you may even lose the game. But their calculation ability decreases. But I know alcohol increases their ability to take risk, so they can start more dangerous attack. Some people would say they would prefer to play calm or just positionally, but when these people are under the alcohol, they can play more risky, they can sacrifice pieces that can be dangerous. But of course their ability to calculate will be much lower. So anyway, if you are playing a chess game, I don't recommend you drinking any alcohol before the game and during the game. It may affect your performance and not in a good side. Okay, any other questions? I'm more a tactical player. However, if I'm quite familiar with the position I play, I know how to play it positionally and I can really enjoy it. But I prefer to finish the game in the middle game with the tactical strike. Or I can just gain the material and then pass the game to the end game, which will be easily to win. As for smoking, so I don't smoke myself. And I don't recommend smoking, by the way, but some chess players smoke, especially such a strong player like Alexander Grishchuk, and he thinks it's okay, and he is still a strong player. Maybe if he wasn't smoking, he was weaker, but who knows, maybe it would be vice versa. Maybe if he wasn't smoking, he would be much stronger. So some webinar about chess history, maybe. Yes, and Mikhail Tal was smoking tobacco. Yes, he was. Okay, if there are no questions, then let's finish for today. I wish you good luck in your Blitz games. Try to use the tips that I suggested, that I recommended. I can repeat them quickly. So play logical moves quickly. Know the opening you are playing. Sharpen your position in case your opponent is in a time trouble. Learn and practice endgames, especially Rook endgames. And of course, analyze your own Blitz games after you play them. Okay, is it worth to go for the master title? It depends on what would you like to achieve with the master title. I would say yes, but for example, if you are good in something else, then you'd better continue in that area. However, if you like chess, then yeah, why not to go for the master title? How to improve your performance and your rating? This is a good question, and actually, okay, one more minute of a self-promotion, just a sec. So here on my website, I have a tab that is devoted to coaching, and you can click on a training program. So if you want to improve your chess level, it can be just in general, improve your performance, improve your rating, then you should create a training plan. You should ask a strong player, or you can try to do it yourself. There is no guarantee that you can do it successfully, but this is what I offer. So you send 10 games that you played, I do the analysis, and you receive a weekly plan of what you should do for these 3 months. What openings, when to play games, which videos I recommend, which books, and I also provide you with PGNs. So that's why if you want to get better, you should create a training plan. Okay. Yeah, just playing chess doesn't improve your level. You should work on your weak sides, and like for example, you are bad with calculation. You should study calculation. You should practice a lot with puzzles or special exercises devoted to calculation. Okay, as for this training program, it costs $44. And it's not obligatory to send classical games like maybe 90 minutes. It's okay just to send 30 minutes per side or 15 plus 10. I can also share the link here. And also here. Okay, looks like yeah, thank you guys. Looks like we spent enough time on self-promotion today, and let's finish. Any other questions? Okay, if not, let's finish for today, and hope to see you all guys on my next webinar next Sunday. Good luck.